This is the story of something strange, something that happened on Halloween night. I am going to tell you, and you better listen carefully, because once you hear it, you'll never look at Halloween costumes the same way again. It happened in a small town where people took Halloween very seriously. Every year, the whole place would light up with jack-o'-lanterns, spooky music, and costumes of every kind. Kids would run from house to house, laughing, shouting "trick or treat," and filling their bags with candy. But this year was different. There was a boy named Mark. He was 15, not really a kid, but not an adult either. He wasn't excited about Halloween anymore. He thought he was too old to dress up and go trick-or-treating, but his friends convinced him. They said, "Come on, it's just for fun. One last Halloween before we grow up." So he said yes. Mark didn't have a costume, though, and the stores were all sold out. He went to this old second-hand shop in a quiet part of town. It wasn't the kind of place most kids went. Dusty shelves, weird smells, and a strange man behind the counter who barely talked. Mark looked around and found a long black robe and a mask. The robe was made of thick, heavy cloth, and the mask was something else. Pale white, with hollow eyes and a twisted smile. It looked real. Too real. "Where did this come from?" Mark asked the man. The man just said, "It found you." Mark thought it was just a creepy way of talking, but later he would wish he never took that costume. He put it on that night. The robe felt cold, like it had been kept in a freezer. The mask stuck to his face strangely, like it didn't want to come off. His friends laughed and said, "Man, that costume is crazy. It looks alive." And maybe it was. At first, everything was normal. They went to a few houses, got candy, took photos, made dumb jokes. But after a while, Mark started to feel weird. He wasn't laughing anymore. He felt heavy, like something was pulling him down. His hands were colder than the air, and when he looked in a mirror, he thought, for just a second, that the mask blinked. His friends noticed too. They said, "Hey Mark, you okay?" But Mark didn't answer. His voice wouldn't come out. He tried to speak, but it was like the mask was swallowing his words. And then things got worse. They were walking down a street when Mark suddenly turned and walked into the woods. Just like that. No warning. His friends called after him, shouting, "Where are you going?" But he didn't stop. They ran after him. The trees were tall and close together, and the deeper they went, the darker it got. Mark walked like he was in a trance. His steps didn't make a sound. The robe didn't even rustle. When they finally caught up, Mark was standing in front of an old, broken-down cabin. No one remembered it being there before. It looked like it had been standing for 100 years. Mark opened the door and stepped inside. His friends followed, but the air inside was wrong. It smelled like rot and dust. The floor creaked under their feet, and the shadows moved even though nothing else did. In the corner, there was a mirror. Mark walked to it and stared at his reflection. But it wasn't Mark in the mirror. The thing in the mirror looked like Mark's body. But the face under the mask wasn't human. It had long teeth and black eyes. The mask had melted into his skin. And then the reflection smiled. One of the friends screamed and pulled the mask off Mark's face. It came off like tearing skin. Mark dropped to the floor, gasping like he had been drowning. His eyes were wide, and he said just one thing. "It tried to take me." They burned the costume that night, the robe and the mask. But even in the fire, it didn't burn right. The flames turned green and cold, and the mask twisted like it was alive. The next day, the second-hand shop was gone. Just an empty lot with no sign it was ever there. Mark never wore another costume again. And every Halloween when the night gets quiet, he says he hears a voice in the wind. "I found you. So if you ever find a costume that feels too real, don't wear it. Because maybe, just maybe, it isn't a costume at all. This is the story of something that should have never happened. I am going to tell you, but you need to listen carefully, because what I'm about to say might sound silly at first, like a joke or just a Halloween tale, but it's not. It's real. This is the story of how I carved a pumpkin, and it came to life. It all started a few days before Halloween. I was bored at home, scrolling through videos and eating candy I bought too early. Everyone around me seemed to be decorating their yards and windows, and I thought maybe I should join in for once. I'd never really been big on Halloween, but something about this year felt different. The air was colder, the nights seemed darker. I just felt pulled toward it. So, I went to this roadside pumpkin patch just outside of town. Most of the pumpkins were small or weird-looking, but one stood out. It was huge, dark orange, perfect shape. But what caught my eye were the deep, strange lines across its surface, almost like scars. I asked the old man running the place how much it was. He looked at me for a long time before saying, "That one's not for sale." I laughed. "Come on, it's just a pumpkin." He didn't smile. Some things are better left alone. But I didn't listen. I waited until he turned his back, grabbed the pumpkin, dropped a 20 on the table, and left. That night, I set it on my kitchen table. It felt heavier than it should, like it was full of something more than just seeds and pulp. I took out a knife and started carving. I didn't really plan a face, it just happened. My hands moved on their own. I carved 2 wide, round eyes, a long nose, and a grin that stretched far too wide. When I was done, I stared at it. The face looked alive, like it was grinning at some secret only it knew. I lit a candle, dropped it inside, and turned off the lights. The glow from the pumpkin filled the room, and for a moment, it looked like the face moved. I shook it off. Just shadows, just imagination. But then, later that night, I heard something. A soft scraping sound, like something dragging across the floor. I got up, thinking maybe the candle had fallen over. But when I walked into the kitchen, the pumpkin was gone. At first, I thought someone was playing a prank, but my door was locked, my windows were closed. I turned around, and there it was, sitting in the hallway. The candle was still burning inside it, but the grin was wider, different. The knife I used to carve it was lying on the floor next to it, sticky with something dark. I didn't move. I couldn't. Then the pumpkin rolled slightly toward me. Not fast. Not like in the movies. Just a slow, small movement, like it was testing me. I ran. I grabbed my keys and drove to a friend's house. Didn't even explain much, just told him I needed to crash there. He laughed it off, said I was tired or high on Halloween sugar. The next day I went back home. The pumpkin was gone. I thought maybe I'd dreamed it. Maybe I'd thrown it out in a panic. I even checked the trash. Nothing. But that night, my friend called me. "Hey man, did you bring that pumpkin over here?" My blood turned cold. "What?" "It's on my porch. Same face, same grin, candle burning inside, and now my dog's missing." I didn't know what to do. I told him not to touch it. He laughed. He didn't believe me. The next morning, he didn't answer his phone. I went to his house. Police were already there. No one ever found him. Now, every Halloween, that pumpkin shows up. On a new porch, same face, same grin. And always, someone disappears. Last year, I tried to stop it. I stayed home, boarded my doors, turned off all the lights, but it still came. It was in my kitchen, and the grin, it had my smile. So if you ever carve a pumpkin and you feel like your hands are moving on their own, stop. Throw it away. Burn it. Do whatever it takes. Because once you give it a face, it remembers yours. This is the story of a town you've never heard of. I am going to tell you something strange, something that will make you look over your shoulder when the night feels too quiet. This is the story of a town where Halloween never ends. It started when I was driving across the country last fall. I was supposed to be heading to my cousin's place, but I took a wrong turn somewhere in the hills. My GPS died, and there were no signs, no lights, just long, empty roads and trees that seemed to close in the deeper I drove. Then I saw a wooden sign by the side of the road. It said, "Welcome to Hollow Creek." I didn't remember seeing it on any map, but the sun was going down, and I needed gas and maybe a place to sleep. So I went in. Right away, I noticed something was off. There were pumpkins on every porch. Cobwebs stretched over windows. Skeletons hung from trees. People were walking around in costumes, witches, ghosts, vampires. But it wasn't Halloween. It was the middle of November. I stopped at a small diner. The waitress smiled at me, but her eyes looked tired, like they hadn't closed in days. "Nice costume," I said, trying to be friendly. She wore a black dress and had fake blood on her neck. She didn't laugh. She just said, "We all wear something." I looked around. Everyone in the diner was dressed up. One guy wore a scarecrow mask and didn't take it off even to eat. A little girl in a clown suit sat silently, staring at me without blinking. After I ate, I asked where I could spend the night. The waitress pointed to a small motel down the road. "Room 6 is empty," she said. "Don't open your window." That was a weird thing to say. I laughed nervously, but she didn't smile. When I got to the motel, the air felt colder. The kind of cold that doesn't touch your skin but slides into your bones. I parked, went into room 6, and locked the door. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept hearing music, soft carnival music, playing just outside. I peeked through the curtains and saw a parade moving down the street. People in strange, old-fashioned costumes walked slowly, like they were sleepwalking. A man with a jack-o'-lantern for a head led the way, holding a lantern that gave off blue fire. I shut the curtain. My hands were shaking. The next morning, I tried to leave. I drove back to the sign where I entered the town, but the road looped around and brought me right back to Hollow Creek. I tried again, same thing. I was trapped. At the diner, I asked the waitress what was going on. She looked me straight in the eye and said, "We made a deal long ago, to keep something asleep. As long as we celebrate Halloween, it stays down there." "Down where?" I asked. She pointed to the old church at the edge of town. "Below that?" "The thing we buried. The town founders woke it once, by accident, and it wanted more. So we give it what it wants. Fear, costumes, masks, sweets, screams, Halloween, forever." I laughed, because it sounded insane. But then I saw her hand. Her fingers had started to rot. Not like a wound, like they were turning into something else. "You stay too long," she whispered, "and you start to change. This town doesn't let go." I ran. I didn't care where. I just needed to get away. But I couldn't. Days passed, or maybe weeks. I couldn't tell anymore. Every night, there was a parade. Every day, pumpkins reappeared even if I smashed them. The scarecrow man watched me from corners. The little clown girl smiled wider every time I saw her. People started calling me by a different name. They said, "You've always been here." And worst of all, I started to forget who I was. My name, my home, my life before Hollow Creek. Now I wear a costume too, a mask I can't take off. So if you ever see a road you don't remember, with a sign that reads, "Welcome to Hollow Creek," turn around. Drive fast. Don't look back, because once you enter, Halloween never ends. This is the story of something that still haunts me, even now. I am going to tell you, but you have to listen closely, because once you hear it, you might never open your door on Halloween the same way again. This is the story of the trick-or-treaters that vanished without a trace. It happened 5 years ago in a quiet neighborhood You know the kind. Clean lawns, friendly people, kids riding bikes in the streets. Every Halloween, the whole place turned into a fun little world. Houses lit up with decorations, scary music played from speakers, and kids ran around in costumes, laughing and shouting, "Trick or treat!" But that year, something changed. There were 4 of them, 4 kids, around 10 or 11. They were dressed like a vampire, a pirate, a skeleton, and a little witch. I remember because I saw them with my own eyes. They came to my door just after sunset. I gave them candy, told them their costumes looked great, and they smiled and ran off down the street. That was the last time anyone saw them. At first, no one noticed. Parents thought the kids were just out a little longer. But then, the calls started. "Have you seen Emily? Was Jacob at your house?" One by one, the parents went from worried to panicked. The police were called. Search parties were made. People went door to door, looking in yards, sheds, even attics. Nothing. Not a single clue. The weirdest part? Every house they were supposed to visit after mine said the same thing. They never came. The candy in their bags was all from houses before mine. Not one piece was added after they left my porch. Now, here's where it gets strange. A man who lived 3 streets over, Mr. Hanley, swore he saw the kids near the woods at the edge of the neighborhood. He said they were walking, holding hands, heading into the trees, still laughing like it was all part of the fun. But why would they go there? The woods were dark and deep. No kid ever went in there alone, especially at night. The police searched the forest for days. Dogs, drones, everything. They found nothing. No footprints, no broken branches, not even a wrapper from a candy bar. It was like the kids just disappeared. After that, things in the neighborhood got quiet. Halloween wasn't the same. People stopped decorating. Parents kept their kids inside. Some even moved away. The fear stayed, but it didn't stop there. Exactly 1 year later, on Halloween night, something happened that chilled me to my core. I was sitting alone at home, just watching old movies when I heard a knock at the door. I wasn't planning to hand out candy, but I got up anyway. I opened the door, and there they were. The vampire, the pirate, the skeleton, the little witch. Same costumes, same smiles. But something was wrong. Their faces were pale. Their eyes, too wide. Their smiles, frozen. I stood there, frozen too. I said, "Are you okay?" But they didn't speak. They just held out their bags. I dropped candy into each one, my hands shaking. They turned and walked away. No words, no laughter. I watched them until they disappeared down the street. The next morning, I went to the police. I told them what I saw. They checked my doorbell camera. The footage was there. The sound of knocking. Me opening the door, but the porch was empty. No kids. No one there at all. Now every Halloween I wait, and every year at the same time I hear the knock. And every year I open the door and see them standing there. But here's the worst part. Last Halloween, after they left, I found something on my porch. A tiny note, written in crayon. It said, "Come with us next time. So if you hear a knock this Halloween, and you see 4 little trick-or-treaters in old dusty costumes, don't answer. Don't look. Because if you do, you might be the next one to vanish without a trace."